There's this topic of urgency that we used to have. You remember we were just talking about songs that are good and yet old, or old and yet good. And
Yes.
speaking of old and good, good and old, you remember back in the 2010s when we were all younger then if we're alive now. Just the way that's the way math and time work. But I might be rewriting this in my head, but I feel like you are not in the on the vendor side yet. You are working at various places at Home Depot and other places. And tell me if you had the same perception. But I feel like then, from by 2010s, I mean more like 2015 to 2020 or so.
Yeah.
But maybe so a sliding somewhere in the middle there. You would have some software vendor come to you. Now, of course, if it was the pivotal people, they would come and tell you about how you need to get Cloud Foundry, do some Spring and Java. We got Greenplum, we got Gemfire, we got this, we got that, all these things. But it could also be Salesforce coming at you to sell you to help you with your CRM or something. But I think the first slide was always the same or near same. There was this one slide, and I think it was the American Economic Institute or something like that. And then after that, it was R. Ray Wang who used this chart. And there was this chart that said something. I'm going to get it all messed up because I don't care for the accuracy. But it was like it's in 2015, 73% of the companies that were on the Fortune 500 in 1942 are no longer on the Fortune 500. And
Great.
then if you were lucky, because this would be fun, there would be a big picture of Deming, and it would say, surviving evolution is not mandatory, or something. I butchered that quote too, but you would
Yep.
basically get that. And then it was like, then please buy our software, right?
Right.
But the whole thing was like, this is what I think of as the comical way of putting digital transformation, the era of digital transformation, where there was just this big freaking out that the tech companies were going to replace all of the existing incumbents because the tech companies were so much better at software. Like as a final thing, I remember, we still here at Tanzu, but especially and at Tanzu and at Pivotal, we'd sell to insurance companies a lot, FSIs, the financial services industry. And I remember some of the American car insurance companies were freaked out one summer because Google just started up an aggregator searching for car insurance, and I
Yes.
think I think they were like, "That's it,
Yeah, we're
you know,
cooked.
yeah, 2,000 years of a business done, destroyed this summer." Now Google, of course, as they like to do, they just shut that down in a few months and never did anything with it, if I remember. But first, I mean, do I have an accurate read on like there was this urgency driving a lot of like enterprise software? I think especially in our space, like software development in that kind of 2010, I mean, sorry, 2015 to 2020 area. Did you
Yeah.
feel that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the quote that I saw that was used pretty frequently, and I'm not good with names and books and all that, but it was that whole software is eating the world thing. Yeah, and it was this notion that it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Like, for me, it was retail, but you had to be a tech company. Like, you couldn't be a retail company. You had to be a tech company that did retail.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it was the whole there was a lot of like scare tactics too, if I remember correctly. So it was like, hey, remember Blockbuster and Kodak, and what happened to those companies?
Oh, that's a good reminder. That's the
Yeah.
decade where we learned the complete history of Kodak. I
Yes.
think I
Yeah.
think came up a lot. I should dig up this link, but I remember a couple years ago reading a more comprehensive accounting of Blockbuster, and it's not that they like, it's a lot more rational than it was made out to be at the time. Like
Right.
it was, but it's kind of just goes to show you. But so I think and it'd be interesting to hear what your take is. But my take on that is, I think the freaked out companies adapted really quickly, and they're pretty much fine now. Like I don't, I'm sure there was lots of gnashing around and pain that people went through, but like it seems like a lot of there's two things. One, I think a lot of the companies that were like on the Fortune 500, this would be a good study, in
Yes.
like 2018, are probably still there in 2025. I don't. Maybe it's just because I get old and I don't pay attention, but I don't really think much new has happened other
Yeah,
than stuff in the tech world, right? But it's not like Uber, like that. There's not something like that is just like
right.
completely upended something.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is on the heels of that whole, if I remember correctly, the whole lean startup movement. There was all this talk about, the innovator's dilemma, and I think I could be misremembering, but and I was just having this conversation actually with a couple of ex-colleagues a couple months ago, and what we were talking about is I think it's a lot harder to catch companies by surprise now, like with those things, because to your point, I think everyone has started to mature and realizing that technology is important. And so
They're like
this
wise
notion
to
of,
it.
yeah, like it's harder to kind of come out of nowhere and disrupt a company, because I feel like everyone's kind of, trying to do some experimentation and, and competing with their own selves internally and all of those things. So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. I'll have to go back and use some AI stuff to do some research, but I think that would be an interesting thing too, is look at the number of those Fortune 500 companies and how what the turnover rate of that looks like over time would be
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. Now, obviously, there are new things in the world since
Yes.
2019, and even new business models, but I think a lot of those companies, as we were both saying, have adapted. And like I was in thinking about this afternoon. Like I here in the Netherlands, I bank at ABN AMRO. Every time I think about saying it out loud, just a weird name for a bank. I'm sure it stands for something, but it's not very descriptive. And their banking software is great. It's very, it's got that. I guess like our show here, it's got that very flat, no shadows aesthetic to it. You can do things easily, and they have new stuff in their software, so they've adapted to like maybe not this like weekly iteration, at least that you can see, but like I feel like most organizations I work with, I'll say many, like their software is fine, like, and you
Right.
can tell that they do something with it,
Yes.
like it doesn't just sit there, um, and and so people have like organizations have adapted to it, and they're doing things which is great. So maybe all that freaking out kind of paid off, and I think now I feel like there's another. I think we had kind of like a cool down period of freaking off. Everyone
Yes.
adapted to the software, and then they were just freaking out about YAML for a while, but no one cared except the IT people. And now it seems like if we like look out on the proverbial horizon there, there's like this storm of freak out coming. That's just like AI stuff, and there's
Yes.
there's two things. One, like I don't really know if enterprises know exactly what they're going to do with AI. They're trying out a whole bunch of different things and seeing what works and not. And then two, a follow on to that is like it feels like in our platform talk, like having a platform is going to be equally important for whatever AI stuff you want to do as
Yes.
it was during the digital transformation era.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're skipping a freak out period. And I don't know what to call it, but whenever you have a freak out period which causes investment and change, that usually I think, and again, I'd have to do some research, but my gut tells me that's followed up by a freak out period of like, hey, we need to reduce cost. And
Oh
so
yes.
and so I think this pendulum like kind of keeps swinging. And so I think, based on my experience and a lot of customers I've talked to, um, the whole digital transformation, agile transformation, cloud journey kind of stuff that took place then, I think has been followed up by this reverting back to, okay, how do we control the cost in IT? And then so I think a lot of
Mm.
companies are being asked to do the same or more with less, instead of having these very inspirational messages around, hey, like we're a retail company, but let's get better at software, or let's drive better digital experiences for our customer. I think the overall message for the last several years has been like, how do we keep costs down? um,
Yeah.
but now with AI, to your point, right, like now that we're coming, I would say the messaging is still not clear, I still think, again, to come from a home improvement side of things, we call that a nail looking for a hammer. I think there's a lot of companies that are like, hey, like we need to do something with AI. I don't know what that is yet, but like we need to do something with AI. And there's a bunch of people in these companies trying to figure out what that is. But to your point, um, if you've been one of those companies that has gotten off the path of being this very innovative, innovation driven, experimentation, agile kind of thing to this, cost cutting and that sort of back to outsourcing more, I think there's challenges there with now trying to bring all that muscle memory back in house and do things. So yeah, absolutely. I think companies are struggling right now with what the approach on how to do that.
And how, you talk with a lot of different organizations nowadays, not just yourself, so to speak. Like, how do you think most of them have been in that like downshift period where they're focusing on optimizing, let's say, instead of like, this is kind of a insulting way to put it, but instead of like improving and growing and like always getting better, but it's more on just kind of like a steady state run things. And I'll add to that, because I'll add a little bit of my answer is like a lot of the conversations I've had over the past 4 years have been about like stuff that happens like under the covers. Like, we've got to move our infrastructure here, or I know this is valuable, we've got to comply with this regulation.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been like customer focused.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think there's a lot of reasons. I think COVID was another big reason.
Yeah.
So
I sort of left that out of my timeline.
No, it's fine. But no, it's a perfect storm of several things. But I think at the end of the day, you're absolutely right, is that there's been a lot of focus on sort of non-customer facing, sort of the sausage making, infrastructure, cost side of things where, and again, I think in the pivotal days, and a lot of consultants, there was all this talk about business outcomes and business drivers. And I think, and using IT as an arm for catapulting, sort of, moving the business that, I forget what they call that, but for being a driver for the business and being a differentiator for the business. And I think in the several years that have followed recently, for a lot of reasons, COVID, the ones you mentioned as well, I think it's gone back to more of a cost center view of IT. And now with AI, right? Like, I think now it's, trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's like, okay, wait, hold on. Like, no. Like, I need you guys, I need the AI.
Now we got to do something.
Yeah. We got to do something innovative again. We have to, so to your point, yes. Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason that companies are being challenged right now.
Yeah. And I mean, do you sense that there's, well, I mean, is there some amount of like scrambling, or is everything kind of cool? Do people have time to figure it out? Like, is there an urgency to it, or is that just something that like technology fetishist people bring to the table?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all, and I think it depends on the company. Some companies, right? I think the more regulated ones, I think I don't think they're as open about what they're doing or trying to do, but I think there are some.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it really depends. I don't have a clear answer on that part of it, but I think it has a lot to do with their maturity, their existing sort of culture around software development, how much of it is in-house versus outsourced. I think there's some of it too about the industry that they're in, how regulated they are, where their stuff is today. So it's that part is a very complicated question. I think it depends, and it's all over the place. But there's a lot of factors that play into that.
So drawing on your, like, if we were to do a little, let's call it strategy prognosticating, if that's a phrase, drawing on that's right, drawing on your past experience, and then also the more recent like experience you have talking with organizations, like what do you think? What do you think the pattern is, and therefore like what management and people running this can do when it comes to, here's a new like computer-based workload. I'm being very high level on purpose, that we're going to be wanting to do stuff with, and we need computer stuff, right? Like we
Yeah.
need the infrastructure to run it. We need probably like programmers to do something with it. Then we need to like have all of the. I mean, I'm even answering your question a little bit here. We're going to need the security and managing it, running it. But like how, like what is like the 1 to 2 months of meetings look like where people are like figuring out what they're going to do? How do they sort that out?
Oh man. Yeah. So I think this is, man, I don't want to open a new can of worms, but I think this is where the the Kubernetes side of things has sort of exasperated this a little bit. So I think what's also happened in this period is I think a lot of people have gone down this Kubernetes path and or are trying to DIY a lot of things. So I
Mm,
think what I see is well, okay. So I think from an AI perspective, I think a lot of companies are starting to sort of set up these little internal tiger teams around, AI responsibility or whatever you want to call them, right? They
yeah,
usually as part of like some architectural group or something. But anyway, someone gets anointed as like, hey, you're going to lead us to the future of like, AI. And typically they're understaffed or under resourced or whatever, right?
yeah,
And so then the regulatory and security piece sends as usual tends to kind of be the overruling arm of things, sort of dictating all the constraints and things. But I think what ends up happening is, to your point, when people have to collect some, resources and write some things and deploy them, we get back to the, sort of this SDLC and how good are you, how well does your company do that? Like how good are you at building software and releasing it?
yeah.
And I think what's complicated that with the Kubernetes is, in my experience and the companies I work with, their shared services or infrastructure or IT folks have been kind of toiling away at their version of their company's platform based on Kubernetes. And most of the companies I work with, that hasn't gone extremely well. Like adoption's low. So then, to the point where they go to the cloud and a lot of them are using not that, like they tend to sort of elect for these higher abstract, like more what we would consider a platform. And
Right.
so I think that is part of the reason. I think it's part of the reason that it's taking a little while is because there's this period where it's like, they're kind of being asked and forced to use a thing, and the business is sort of like saying, "Well, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't want to do that, or I don't know how to do that," and so they end up, kind of going off the rails and doing it in other services on cloud providers. So I think that's part of what's holding them back a little bit. And again, it goes back to, I know this sounds like a sales pitch, but like I really do believe this stuff. But I think it goes back to this notion of having a platform and a team that supports it, that cares about, how our developers are doing and how they get along and how good they are at doing their jobs. And by that I mean like releasing things for the business. And I think whenever we pull away from that, then these things like AI come up and there's a scramble to kind of get back to that. And it's
Mm.
just hard. It's hard to kind of bring all of that expertise and stuff back into the fold and time to do it like in a timely manner.
Last time we talked about like product management with platforms and a little bit, and you're making me think like if you were maybe not 100% of the time, but like if you were product managing your platform, let's even say you're product managing the application development experience inside your organization, right? Like you were
Yes.
thinking about like the way that we develop and run software that our business uses. That's a capability, a capacity. It might even be a pillar, depending on
Right.
which slides you're looking at.
Yeah.
But it's a thing that we have, and if you are kind of product managing that, part of product managing it would be this kind of creeping awareness of a new type of, I'm going to use the word again, workload that was out there, like
Yes.
AI, and you would, in theory, using kind of a even product management as a discipline would, it can't anticipate everything, but at some point you would be like, I think there's something going on here. We
Yeah.
should allocate some of our time or backlog, as some product managers might say, depending on what they do. We should like explore that a little bit and maybe make sure we know what we're doing there. And you might still be caught like a little flat-footed, but at least you would kind of know that it was there and be aware of being involved. And the other side of that that's interesting is, I mean, I guess going back to the 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 question I was asking and then the answer you were giving to it, it's as you were saying, there's this similar cycle that plays out as like, here's the first thing that's going to happen is your in-house IT is not going to be able to give the people using this new thing what they want, and
Right.
so they're going to go somewhere else, just
Yeah.
like every time. And so like it's this is an example of my old thing of like, it's just like flossing. Everyone knows they should floss. They're constantly told they should floss. And aside from whoever you're talking with, because you don't want to insult them, no one flosses, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
like, we all know that they're going to go somewhere else because you don't have it, but we don't do anything about it. And so that's kind of like you're saying. The first thing is, I don't know how you kind of rein things in or prevent it from spreading out in the first place.
Yeah, and I think again, and I think this goes back to that notion of that product group that you're talking about, that where the product is ensuring developers and engineers can deliver for the business within all the company constraints. Like that is the product. And like any good product, like that shouldn't go away. Like the technology and the methodologies underneath can, change over time, but like any good product, like that thing shouldn't go away. And it shouldn't be something that I think leadership should be like, hey, that's table stakes, we don't need to keep investing in that anymore. I think it's something that should be continuously improved and invested upon. There's lots of metrics and data, and yeah, because I think when this pendulum keeps swinging back and forth, again, the companies that don't have that, they get caught flat-footed. And again, like it's for these companies. I didn't say this because it would be rude, but like I was talking to a company that I've been working with for several years, trying to get them, to be a little bit even more mature about how they deliver software. And then they're like, hey, like this AI thing, we really want to do this. And I'm like, hold on, like, we should probably start with like delivering software, because like there's a lot of similarities. In fact, they are exactly the same almost. So yeah, so I have a lot of companies that want to do the AI thing now, and you're like, well, hold on, we need to kind of go back and do the software thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wonder, another thing to track would be, do you have a product manager, or
Right.
is that whatever you want to call it, but is there some role like that going on? And I wonder if there's, you were kind of standing in a little bit in that anecdote of kind of a little bit of what a product manager would be. It's like, I don't know, sort of, but like, if there's probably a good chance that if you're not product managing your infrastructure, your platform, then it's going to result ultimately in like this like shadow IT stuff, because you're
Yeah.
going to be, as they say, reactive to new features that
Yes.
people want to bring
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. I forget there was a book from college where it was like the inmates are running the asylum. Like, yes, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
without product management, you have all of these, and I love them, and I used to be one of them, but you have all these very technical, sort of, resume driven, ambitious people sort of building things. It's like the whole like build it and hope they kind of come thing. Like, yeah, so you definitely need some product management. And that's one of the things that I always ask whenever I talk to customers that want to, move the needle on something or impact some change. One of the first things I always ask is like, well, who in your organization sort of owns this notion of ensuring that developers are productive, right? And looking at metrics, and how do you know they're productive? How do you know the business is, having their needs met by IT? Like there a group that is looking at that or cares about that today? And if there's not, like that's a great place to start, right? Like, so that's typically where I start is with that.
Well, there you go. There's the strategizing. The,
Yes,
the the the
exactly.
the 30 to 60 day thing is like, let's just go through a series of questions here, or maybe it's just not a series, it's just a few. But that's a good first one. Is like, who is in charge, who is a what who's keeping track of your ability to do software well, right?
Yes,
Which
exactly.
that may not be all of what you need for AI, because some of your AI stuff might be you are looking at your existing like I'm going to put it in my jokey way again, your existing computer based stuff. Like, applications that you buy from other people, not that you build on your own, right?
Right.
And they might be evaluating how do we get AI involved in that, right? Like, do we get the Copilot thing over here? Do we add in, so that's slightly different than who's in charge of software development. But so you kind of take that part off the table. And then in theory, what's left is how you're going to use AI in all of the software that you write, the way that you customize it. And then in
Yes.
that case, like you're saying, the next question is like, and I'm broadening what you're saying, is like, so are you any good at making your own software?
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Or let's visit your how you've optimized software building and delivery, however you
Yeah.
want to phrase it.
Yeah, and it's there are kind of those two different angles, right? Like and I wasn't really considering this initially, but it's important is that this notion of AI as a tool, as an internal tool to help you get your job done. And Copilot, and there's a bunch of stuff. Everyone's baking AI into their products now to some degree. Versus like, hey, you're a company delivering something for a customer or in a as a
Yeah.
product, and how do you use AI to either enhance that or add some additional feature. And what's interesting is I think that group, the one that we said, hey, like the group responsible for ensuring that you're doing software well, really does kind of dip their toe in both of those because from a tooling perspective, they want to make sure that what developers are using, has support for that and it's approved and it's safe and all of those things and it's accounted for. But at the same time, the business is going to be saying, hey, we want to use models, we want to do this, we want to use these new kinds of databases, like yada yada. And so they have to be able to support that as well. So yeah, like I think it's to your point, whenever you're innovating, there's going to be a lot of experimentation. You want to be safe, you don't want to break things, you want to go fast. And you're going to need that for these AI features that you're building into your products. And if you're not already good at that, I think AI is just adding a layer of complexity that you're not ready for.
Right, right. And so then, like, let's imagine you're going on this path. Like, how do you think how do people usually not so much answer that question, but how do they figure out how to answer it? Like, how do they gather up that information? I mean, I guess some people might be lucky and they're like, well, I know, and they can just tell you. but
Yeah.
but like if you work at, let's say, like, a very large organization with like thousands of developers and thousands of applications, I don't know, where do you even start to figure out how you're doing with your software?
Yeah. So there's one of the things that I worked on at Home Depot was this notion of, and I try to come up with a lot of analogies, and I don't know which ones work the best. But essentially, like if you were an F1, like an F1 team, right? Like there's this concept of like, well, how good is the car? Right, like and the car is great, like, and how do you know the car is great, right? And you have all these metrics and tooling, but then like how good is your driver, right? And so for me it's like the driver can only get so much out of the car, and that's where I think to answer your question, like where I would start would be those two spectrums within a company, which is I would go talk to the product organization, the product owners, the product managers, right? The people doing that, and saying, hey, like, in your view, how well is the IT organization supporting your need to deliver these features that you're kind of asking to build, right? And so if I view them sort of as the driver of the car, and then you would go to the shared services or the IT or infrastructure group, and you say, hey, like, you have someone trying to use this machine and get the most out of it and go fast and do all these things. Like, how well are you in providing them for that? And so like those are the two, that's where I would start. So I would start with the product organization and kind of get their impression about how things are going. And then I would go to the shared services organization and say like, hey, like, how do you think things are going? And usually there's a big gap, or actually there's not a big gap. I think typically the shared services group says, they're not very happy with us, and there's tension.
There's a known gap, I
Yeah,
guess.
there's a known gap. Yeah. So and so then the question is like, fantastic, like how interested are both parties in narrowing that gap? And
Right.
usually they're interested. So
And by product you mean, I mean, I think the business is another phrase, right? Like
mhm. Yeah.
whatever part of your organization that is not IT, that is
Yes.
consuming what IT is making to
Yes.
run the
Yeah.
organization.
And not IT's version of it, because typically what I see also is the business has their product people, but then we sort of kind of create their delegates on the IT side. And that's an important input. But yes, to your point, you definitely want to go to the source on the business side and talk to their product people and see how things are going. And that can be, when you get into the details of it, whatever, tracking tools they're using, like user stories, looking at velocity and stuff. Now, those don't go down. I don't want to go down that path. Like, I don't want to get down the path of like the wrong metrics to look at. But I think as a starting point, it's useful to look at, how they track features and how those are going and how long that takes and the issues afterwards. That's a really good starting point to kind of dig into things.
Yeah, well, it is to do your disclaimer, not to go down the metrics path, but to maybe dip our toes into a little bit to
Yeah.
make the point you're making. That I think maybe you remember, but I think this was 2 years ago. There was a little spike in our little world of computers, whatever it is we do, of people who are very interested in developer productivity
Mm-hmm.
metrics. There was DevX stuff. Remember, it's capital D, lowercase e, lowercase v, uppercase X.
Yeah.
But some people would spell it an E before the X because it's
Yeah.
developer experience. I don't know. Some people they don't like the E.
Yeah.
Some people they like the E. Anyways, but I remember, famously McKinsey came out with some report, and it was basically like you only have to use this cluster of metrics or something. I don't really even remember the details, but it caused like it was the biggest stink since Gartner proposed bimodal IT. If you were around then, that was a big stink in the
Yeah.
computer world. But I was talking with one of my friends, John Willis, like the DevOps and otherwise guy, and he was saying, because I'd given a talk about developer productivity metrics, and he was like, you skipped over an important thing with all these metrics you're talking about, which is your software helping the company make money?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Or whatever the end is. And it
Right.
seems like, well, my sense is it's often hard to impossible to figure that out, but maybe not. Like, how do
Yeah.
you do that?
No, that's a great question. And I was heavily involved in that whole thing. Again, because of COVID, there was a lot of interest in figuring out like remote work and in-office work and like which one's more productive and all of that. But to your point, this is where I think you need two separate measuring things. So I think the metrics that you're talking about is really good at measuring the car or the machine, like,
The
how,
gauges or whatever.
yes, the gauges, like how well tuned is the machine, but it doesn't tell you how good the driver is. And so there was this idea that I had that nothing ever came of it because I had moved on by this point, and I'm sure someone has done something in this space. But one of the ideas that I had was, as a product organization, if you look at KPIs and all of these things, they're usually based on some sort of hypothesis. Like, I hypothesize if I introduce this feature that we will do, we'll increase X by Y%. The notion that I had is, if you had some software, which I'm sure there exists now, for tracking these things, that you could go back after the fact and say, hey, like, how good are our product engineers or product owners at, correctly hypothesizing the impacts of changes, right? And so then that would tell you, like, to some degree, like how good a driver is. But again, if they are driving in a slow car, right? So that only works if the SDLC process is a well-oiled machine. And so that's why I think those two things kind of have to be looked at a little bit differently.
Yeah, it seems like there's a large I mean, this gets into all sorts of management stratospheric stuff, but like it seems like there's a big tension between like your intuition and like we need a measurement for it. In the sense of probably on as you say the product or the business side, you have an intuition of like are things going well, and like no matter what the metrics are, like you're saying, you can go talk to the business, the product people, and ask them like, is this working out for you? And
Yeah.
they can kind of like they probably aren't going to go to a dashboard to find the answer. They're probably going to
Yes.
tell you.
Right.
Whereas like the other direction, it's kind of like well, all the metrics are good, and they look fine. So anyways, maybe to pull us out to yank us out of metric talk here. Like I think I mean, you introduced a good point. Is like let's get a. I guess the reason why you want to know how you're doing is because you need to figure out what you need to do,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Like what capability do we not have, or that is not functioning well enough for us to like start building a bunch of AI stuff into our apps? Like
Right.
how do we make that possible?
Yeah. And I think from a metrics perspective, that domain is much more mature than the product one, to my experience. Now, I haven't revisited that product metrics thing in a couple of years, but to your point, all those papers that came out, right? I actually think it was like Forsgren and Gene Chem and stuff. They had I forget the book, but they kind of came up with those metrics, the Dora metrics, and then the follow up
Sure.
was like space and all of that. I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
and along with some very helpful disclaimers and caveats around not weaponizing metrics and looking at the wrong ones and all of those, which is important. All of that aside, I think when you're trying to say how well oiled is the machine, that is a very mature space, in my opinion, from a metrics perspective. And I think there are things out there that you can look at to tell you that. So, like anything, any product and continuous improvement, again, I think people should be looking at that continuously at a company. And I think there should be a group of people in charge of ensuring that is getting better and better and better.
Right. So that might be a place to start. Again, as you've kind of said several times, is like, well, do you have a group we could ask?
Right.
Right. Are there either the practitioners who are, as you know, you kind of pointed out one way you would do this, like kind of honing your predicting capabilities, your theorizing capabilities by writing down what your prediction or your hypothesis was and then revisiting it to see if you were right or wrong so you can calibrate on, I forget what you call that, but you calibrate yourself on this stuff. And like, do you have that? or
Yeah.
what is, I guess, I mean, this goes all the way back but it goes to the dimming lean stuff is like, well, so what's your improvement methodology?
Yes.
Let's
Yeah.
start there. Do you
Yep.
have one? Which I guess like this is where I start like in my head I'm rolling my eyes at listening to myself because I'm always like, this continuous improvement stuff again. Here we are. This is where I think your experience maybe could help me put my eyes back at a 90-degree angle. Is like, well, is that an evergreen topic because people don't do it or know about it?
I think you opened the show with accidentally probably the best way. It's like, some things just because they're old isn't bad. Like, I mean, it's like, what's old is new again. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the words change, the bingo changes, right? Like, all of that stuff changes. I think Agile went through a very similar several year verbiage change, right? And before people landed on something that were like, made sense to them, or they just like, hey, can we stop talking about it? But I think this notion of feedback loops, continuous improvement, knowing your customer, and applying that to software development, like I mean, you can change all the words. I don't see how that goes away. Like that just seems like a very important thing that everyone should be doing.
So yeah, so that's a good check-in for the next like big executive level conversation about AI is to be
Yeah.
like, sure, we got our market landscapes and the headwinds and the tailwinds and all that business, but now when we get down to how we're going to, whatever word you want to use, implement it, how we're going to actually do it, the first thing we should ask is, and this is both I get my leading and trailing indicators mixed up, but like this is both a symptom and a helpful disease, which is how do you do continuous improvement around here? Let's talk about that, because chances are high if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to do this AI project very well. Right?
Yeah.
So we need to sort that out.
What's interesting is I think going back to that DevX thing, I think companies have some form of that group, or they're thinking about it, or they have one and maybe they're just not empowered or whatever. But I think the way I would probably word it is, this is how I've worded it is, they're like, hey, we want to do this AI thing. And I just kind of pretend they already have it, so that when I hear that they don't, they kind of are like, oh shit, we should probably have that. And so I think it's more of like, hey, great, like who in your company is looking at sort of that SDLC process, and how productive developers are, and can we work with them to like integrate this into that methodology? And then they're like, that's when and they're just like, well, we don't have anyone that does that. Or they may say, hey, we have this this guy over here, or this group over here, or this woman over here, but that tends to be more rare. So I think if you ask like, hey, we would love to help you do this, who can we get plugged into that does this, and then that kind of lets if that's a thing or not.
And so have you over the past couple of years, have you talked with some organizations who have like gotten some AI applications off the ground into production? Like,
Um, not too many, I think. And again, I think, and it could just be the nature of most of the companies that I work with tend to be more regulated, but so they're not as forthcoming with what they're doing and what their plans are. But I would say, generally speaking, my personal experience in talking to colleagues, it seems like a safe place that everyone is sort of looking at is, these internal sort of search rag model kind of things, where it's like,
yeah.
hey, like we have all this documentation and stuff, like how do we make that readily accessible? I think every company I've talked to is either exploring or doing that, and many of them have released stuff with that. But in terms of releasing things for customers, I have not seen too many. There's a couple, but
Yeah,
not
yeah.
many.
Well, how does that, to generalize and combine things together? How does that kind of, let's call it better search thing tend to go internally? Like, have you heard like kind of like lessons learned or experiences people have had introducing that?
Well, it's running on our platform, so I think that typically,
Well, it's been going well then.
yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like I think it's not typically running on their DIY Kubernetes platform,
Right,
which I
right,
think
right.
goes back to, maybe that's a good way to tie a bow on some of this is, um, I for what they were trying to do, experimenting, right, releasing, like plugging and playing lots of different models. It turns out that having a platform makes that a lot easier. So I think the ones that have been successful are the ones that are doing it on a well-established platform.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and that, I mean, that kind of matches well, the biased intuition that I would have is like,
Right.
so if again, we've kind of like narrowed down AI to like your, this is AI as applied, generative AI, whatever. This is AI as applied to the applications you write yourself to run your organization, whether it's customer facing or internal facing. Kind of like
Right.
you were saying, like better, as I was jokingly putting it, better search, but
Yeah.
doing stuff with your own data. Um, and so if it is in this area, when you're talking about doing AI stuff, what you're talking about is application development,
Yes.
basically, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about how you have this new type of functionality in whatever you're going to do with AI. That's a new thing you can either add to your existing applications or use to make new applications for however it is you're running your business or organization.
Yep.
And so again, that's application development. and and so I've almost lost track of the thought train I was on here. So we'll see if I can walk back through the
Well,
trains and find
well,
it.
I think what I would say is not just application development, but if you kind of look at like agentic stuff in AI, it's very similar to microservices, right? And I think
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's like you know you have these small things that do things, right? Either transforming data or doing something right, and then handing it off to another. Like, I mean, the similarities between them are very
Right. No, and
yeah.
you're correct. I think several years ago when people started talking about platform developers, I stuck application development in my head
Mm.
as a phrase that meant not developing infrastructure. But yes,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
like as you're saying, so you could, for example, you could be writing the application could be just some like model context protocol, some MCP
Yeah.
servers that is something you do have to develop, but is arguably not an application. So yes,
Yeah.
developing
Yeah.
software. And
Yeah.
so now I remember the section of the train I was walking towards, so to speak. But like it seems like in that case, so then the technical question that you have is like, so we need a system that makes it really easy and fast to like get applications out there, or as you say, services, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
I'll call it application slash service, whatever this custom piece of written software
No,
that we
no, no.
have.
You're right. I think depending on who you talk to, I think there's a half the audience wants to hear it your way, and another half.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
But yes. Yeah.
you see that it's like some people will talk. They'll talk about the units of whatever it is you and I are talking about as an application, a service. They might even say a container, a VM. However, they track
Right.
like what the thing is. But yes, this basically like your development team says, here's a build,
Yes. Right. Exactly.
and you've got to run that thing. But it would seem like that's the next logical thing in AI stuff is to just say, as we've said multiple times here, but like, so how good are you at this software development? Like, and
Yes.
if you're going to be experimenting with it, experimenting is another word that brings a lot to the table. If you're going to be exploring and discovering how you're going to harness this new innovation to optimize how your business works in FY whatever Q7,
Right.
right? Like, then that brings us all the way back to what you're saying is like, let's go dust off that lean methodology for doing stuff. At
Right.
least lean enterprise, which is all about a lot of what we were saying is we've got a new thing we want to do to change how the business is working. We don't know exactly how it's functioning. Now we need everything that supports that.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's again because I think even though it's similar to application microservice development, there are a couple new complexities. And I think that when you try to just jump straight to that without having the other stuff, it's just more difficult. So again, it's I mean, and to be fair, I think it's just a reminder for companies be like, hey, like would love to help you, but let me help you on this part first. And I promise like the leap from that to this is very small. And you're gonna kind of knock out both by doing this.
Yeah, you've all sorts of mixed metaphors on directionality here, but you've driven us, I think, to a good simplification is like all right, you want to do AI stuff first. You need to be good at development, at application development, building and running and managing apps. And
Yes.
so let's check on that. And you and I went over all sorts of things for it, but like once you're good at that, then you can do this other stuff. Like if you remember, our old pal Andrew Schaefer, he used to say, before I can teach you to surf, you need to know how to swim. And so like,
Yep.
I guess you could do it out of order, but it might be a little dangerous. It might
Yes.
require additional equipment.
Oh man, love that guy. That guy was fun.
Well, speaking of things that are fun, I think we can wrap up our episode here now. We have our little check-in. We have episode 2. What's your episode 2 review of the process? What's working well? What can we change? What do you like about it?
I like it. I like how we sort of accidentally landed on like a really cool little bow on that. Everything came full circle. No, I like it. Yeah, I don't know. I think I need to ask you more questions. I think that's we need to get it to where I'm asking. There's a lot of really good things in your head. I need to get those
Well,
pulled
that's
out.
it's like I always tell people, the easiest public speaking you'll ever do is being on a panel, because all you have to do is show up and just answer questions. And
Exactly.
if you don't know the answer to the question, there's probably other panelists and they'll answer it for you, and then
That's
you
right.
just move on. You don't want to running a panel is actually, I think moderating a panel is almost more annoying. Is this true? It's almost, it can be as much work as actually just presenting on your own. So you gotta watch out for the allure of moderating a panel. Not
It
easy.
seems harder. It seems harder to me. I'll be honest. It seems
Yeah,
harder.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so if you're watching this now, you know one place that we broadcast it. We have it on YouTube and the LinkedIn, and I think on my Twitter account, and then on our old Tanzu Twitch account. I see we have some old friends from there. We'll see how that pans out. I tried to answer some of the questions, but I couldn't leave comments on LinkedIn and other places. And I'm terrible at like logging in to like 5 different services to monitor things, so I just don't. But you know, in the future, maybe we'll also get some audience questions. And then as just one, I've been revising or I've started to revise a platform as a product paper that we've had for a while, authored way back in 2017 and 2018, and then revised in 2021. I think the revision was just to add in the VMware logos and fonts. I'm not sure the content changed that much, but that might be something we can visit as well. And whatever happens between now and next time, and we'll stream on Tuesdays at let's see, 4 p.m. Amsterdam time, and then what did you say time it was for you? 10?
It starts at 10 a.m. my time on the East Coast.
That's right, the U.S. East Coast. And yeah, so join us next time. And thanks everyone who joined us here and said hello. Hello to all of you as well. And we'll see you later.
Thanks. See ya.
This is the odd part where we're still streaming and I'm clicking on buttons to end it.